3, 2, 1, go live.
It said go.
It said go. We are live
What's up, y'all?
for a very special Facebook Friday.
It's a very special Facebook Friday.
Yeah.
Summer night edition, y'all.
It is a summer. I gotta stop doing
With the
this
thumbs
because
up.
it does it does that. But a very serious topic, a history of American violence.
Yeah.
John Wayne culture. Before we jump into that, as we always do, couple quick community announcements. In Our Own Voices has their Jazz in July fundraiser tomorrow in Albany. It's always a lot of fun. Tangela Grown, shout out to her and her staff. You can still buy tickets.
Yeah.
It's not too late.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that it's in the posted to our page so folks don't gotta go looking for it. And then of course our boy Adonis is going to
Voices
for sure have his end of the month poetry over at the Electric City Barn here in Schenectady. You never know who's gonna show up on stage. And as a matter of fact, he reached out to me. He's planning something for September.
Really?
Yeah. So we only in July.
Listen, man,
I'm a little excited.
I'm excited.
A little excited.
Always, down to support that brother. He's bringing, the type of art and energy, centering the culture in a way that we sorely needed in our community. So big shout out to Adonis.
Yep.
And his whole team of really, really great artists, giving folks an opportunity to come. They got the open mic sessions, spit their truth.
And he finds folks that,
yeah,
like, I feel as if they gravitate to him. He goes and looks for them. The talent that exists now has a place to show up.
That's right.
And it's really dope. And then, of course, Black August is less than 2 weeks away.
Black August.
Stay tuned. Why is the
with the thumbs? I don't know.
Is that? I don't know, but listen, Facebook is trying
not
to
liking Black
shadow
August?
us. I don't know.
I mean, as they may not want to, but Black August, an opportunity.
It's crazy.
Black August.
Yes.
What is Black August, Jamaica? What is happening?
We
in
ain't
Black
talking
August?
about that because today we're talking about a
August?
history of American violence, John Wayne culture. Next month we will have plenty to talk about. Some special guests coming on, conversations. So y'all just pay attention, stay tuned.
But the people gotta know what Black August is.
We're gonna tell them next time. Could you stop right now?
I'm just saying.
It's a history of violence. It's about to get aggressive in here. It's a history of American violence, John Wayne culture. In the context, I feel like I can't put my hands up here because I'm going to thumbs up. In the context of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, Project 2025, and this isn't a new conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to start with your boy.
And if y'all know who my boy is, it's Jimmy B, James Baldwin, one of the greatest thinkers, orators, writers, in the last several generations. Brilliant man.
Kick us off with a little bit of James Baldwin and that John Wayne culture, so we can let's just
Where
go.
do you stand in relation to the Negro figures in the media who we see who frighten us the most, and maybe some of you the most, the ones who want to burn it down, demolish it, the ones who have totally given up? I assume you haven't totally given up.
Well, I'm still alive. It's still breathing. And so as long as breath is in me, I will never give up. But if you think that Rap Brown, you're referring to rap breathing, Stokely, are something new, I refer you back to an old song. No one even knows who wrote it. And it's supposed to be spiritual. It's supposed to be about, Christian church, but it really is a slave revolt song. The man says, if I had my way, little children, great God, if I had my way, I'd tear this building down. It is not new for me. We've always felt that. It is new for you. And if we were white, if we were Irish, if we were Jewish, if we were Poles, if we had, in fact, in your mind, a frame of reference, our heroes would be your heroes too. Nat Turner would be a hero for you instead of a threat. Malcolm X might still be alive. It is that you can face, in some ways, The discontent of white people, when they rise, they're heroes. And, everyone is very proud of brave little Israel, a state against which I have nothing. I don't want to be misinterpreted. I'm not an anti-Semite. But, when the Israelis pick up guns, or the Poles, or the Irish, or any white man in the world says, give me liberty or give me death, the entire white world applauds. When a black man says exactly the same thing, word for word, he is judged a criminal and treated like one, and everything possible is done to make an example of this bad nigger so there won't be any more like him. Now, you can do this if you like, until your party is over. But I know, after all, who my heroes are. And George Washington is not one of my heroes, for example. Neither is Booker T. Washington. What the American public has always tried to do is to accommodate me into a system which is always meant to my death. They want me to become an accomplice to my own murder.
So it's hard for me to stop, right? To end anywhere in any sentence of James Baldwin speaking, but here we are, and the graphics that we shared on social media and on our emails showed pictures of Trump, bleeding from the shots fired, the ceasefire that's being called for in Palestine. We hear about gun violence constantly, and there is a different reaction depending on who is the victim.
That's right.
But the idea that violence is not American, right, and that America fights against it and doesn't want it, I think is something that we still need to grapple with. And really, I'd like you to talk about very specifically this idea of the John Wayne culture, because it's something that you talk about very often.
Yeah. When you think about American violence, or when you think about America, period, or at least how we talk about America, this place of independence, this place of freedom, this place, where generally speaking, people can come here and find their way, right? That's what we're told.
Mm-hmm.
I think the stories we tell ourselves are sometimes meant to divorce us from the realities of what this place is. If you got to take this way back before we even get to John Wayne, which is actually more storytelling
mm-hmm.
About the country and about
right.
the history, which was horribly inaccurate.
Yep.
About like who cowboys were, who the natives that were here were, what it was really all about.
Mm-hmm.
You go even further back to the original, like the conquering of the land.
Yep.
And the massive amount of violence that it took to displace all the many, many peoples that were already here. And in addition to that, in the founding of the United States of America, originally the 13 colonies at the
mm-hmm.
time, there was a Revolutionary War and a breaking away from Great Britain, which was a massive amount of violence in order for that to happen. You think about before that time and after that time, the enslavement of so many Africans here on this continent, and the epidemic levels of violence that had to happen in order to keep those people in line.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Because they always fought against it. They were
exactly. So if you think clearly about all of that, it doesn't take much to just like, okay, well, how, in thinking back to the origins, once you peel back away from the stories of the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, and the Mayflower, and Plymouth Rock, and all of that, like, you really, I think, understand that this place was born in violence. It's been violent the entire time in the formulation of it and the maintaining and sustaining of it, and it's continued on. Yeah. And that level of violence on the government level, on its own people, on other people's, seeps through to everyone else, to the point where you get to the stories of John Wayne, and this idea of being able to take matters into your own hand.
Yes.
Right? Being able to enact a level of violence against those you deem to be wrongdoers,
and
right?
be seen as the hero.
And be seen as the hero.
Yes.
And be applauded for that.
For being a vigilante.
Exactly.
Yes.
And working outside of the law.
Right. Or determining the law.
Determining the law, but also you're just thinking specifically about vigilantism.
Right.
And what that means specifically in its definition is being able to work outside of the law and being able to mete out justice as you see fit. If you take it from John Wayne to John Wick to the Punisher to Batman to like all of these different levels of violence, now we're talking about it on a cultural level in the history of it, I think seeps out in the rest of our communities. Our most glorified, people in history. Like, think about this. This is interesting. How lauded, like today, is someone like an Al Capone, or Billy the Kid, or any of the other kind of folks we know in history who were working known for violence, working outside of societal norms in order to accomplish their ends. But how much do we hear, for instance, Nat Turner, right? Like, how is Nat Turner remembered in history? Largely throughout society. Like, we know about Nat Turner.
How many folks watching know who Nat Turner is?
Yeah.
Even loosely.
Yeah.
Let alone the details of
of
his work.
Yeah.
Towards freedom.
Yeah, and then that clip you just showed, they're talking. He was talking about Rap Brown, like people that want to burn it down, right? Like there's an entirely different framing.
Yeah.
For those folks versus the people that are lauded as heroes throughout history.
Because the colonizers who came here burned it down.
Yeah.
They
very literally
set fire to indigenous lands, to homes, to people, and then also set fire to Black folks, right? Like they literally burned down other cultures and societies because they deemed them inferior and felt as if this was their right to say, we claim this land and it's better for us to have it than you. And James said all the things that depending on what you look like and who you are and your place in the society as it has been created will determine if it's valid, if it's legitimate. We face those same challenges today about funding the Ukraine, but not Palestine, right? And deciding Russia, of course, is, doing the wrong things. And they bombed a church, it was a school or a hospital, and children died all over the news. Israel has continuously, for more than 9 months now, bombed and killed hundreds of thousands of people, including masses of women and children, but they are said to be fighting against terrorism, right? So as we look at these parallels of, the culture that we live in, which violence is accepted and who we're fighting against, I think we still always need to recognize at this point in history, it is a global society. And it is not just what we do in the United States, but what the United States does as an international entity and leader, and how that then reverberates back and impacts us, so that when shots are fired at a Trump rally, which should not have happened, is treated differently than when children are killed in a school by the same weapon that was used at the Trump rally.
Think about that.
So thoughts and prayers.
I mean, that's what we get.
Thoughts and prayers.
We get thoughts and prayers when we've seen the great number of mass shootings that have happened throughout the country. And there's so many different, I think, and just talking about, there's just so many different ways we can go with this conversation.
Yeah.
Right. I'll thinking about this assassination attempt and that you said it should not happen. The reality is, even though it hasn't happened for over, I think, 40 plus years, the last presidential either candidate or he was I'm not sure exactly what Reagan was at the time. I think he was the last one to actually get shot. During, I think, candidacy, not while he was president at the time, I think during his candidacy, and I need Bobby Kennedy before him, and John Kennedy before him, and and then throughout history, Garfield Lincoln, etc.
Right, Lincoln.
Now it may not, like that level of violence, it may not reach the upper levels of our hierarchical government structure, but it certainly has no problem reaching us in the community, and like we've seen. The mass shootings, the shootings that have happened in all of the communities, impoverished and of color mostly, but poverty is definitely a metric that impacts the numbers concerning violence in our communities. And we ask the question why. This idea of vigilantism, this idea of meting out some sense of justice, and these individual acts, and then more largely in our communities, like what does that even? How do we wrestle with that? So we have this history that we're trying to talk to people about and reveal, like connecting that to the day-to-day violence that happens in our communities versus what's happening with what happened to Trump. How do we make those connections? Like, what do you think about?
We talked about it a little bit last week, right? Yeah. That inside communities that are noted for the highest levels of crime and arrests and police activity, that police activity includes violence.
Yeah.
That when there is a safety concern, violence is used as a means to gain control. So it is still very much a lesson, right, from our government that this is how you control a situation. If there is agreements between two individuals, there is a level of violence that is used to address it.
Yeah.
The other piece that I think is less obvious, and this will bring us to Project 2025, is the systemic and institutional violence that happens in those same communities. That is not the direct one-to-one of people, getting in arguments, having physical disputes.
I'm about to say it's physical. It's not directly physical.
But it is still an act of violence when you deny people housing or you prevent them the opportunity for food or healthcare. It is still an act of violence against very specific communities, too, in which our society as a whole recognizes on some level who is valued and who is not.
Yeah.
Who receives programs, resources, and opportunities, and who does not.
Yeah.
And Ibram Kendi talks about it a lot. Just Google his name, read any of his articles, or watch any of his videos about that. Systems and structures were created to be able to justify the marginalization of individuals. And so this violence has a much larger picture of determining who is allowed or who should be treated badly in some way, whether it's directly through physical violence or if it's a denial of programs and services that are basic human needs, right? Food, water. I mean,
all of it, which impacts a person's lifespan, a person's quality of life in general. What they're aspiring to, driven to do, etc. Like what we're putting in our bodies impacts all of that. And I kind of want to, because like there's so many different tracks of violence. And I know we're going to jump into Project 2025, and y'all definitely need to stay tuned for that conversation and what that means and what we're voting for in this upcoming election. But like looking at this culture of violence and like peeling back the stories and all of that about the mythology around America and its exceptionalism and all of that. We are exceptional in violence, and we are exceptional in oppressing others. I guess the question is, just to bring it home to people, like there was a person that was killed on Delaware Avenue, I want to say a week ago. He was shot, his car was shot up like 13 times by another individual who walked upon him in a parking lot. The guy runs away. And we talked about the week before, there were 6 teenagers who like were from Schenectady, some were from Albany, some from Troy, and how that impacted the entire Tri-City. And there's so many other kind of acts of violence that we know about. I think that for our community, and this is why we have these conversations, it can get confused, and it can be categorized in our heads differently. Right? We take on those same kind of talking points and perspectives from people who don't have our best interests at heart, and they look at our community like it's just their fault.
Right.
And we don't consider the context and the culture to which we are all a part of. Everyone in this country is a part of it. If you look at, and so when I'm talking about entertainment, like we talk about John Wayne and his vigilantism and him admonishing, and John Wick and him admonishing the natives, and John Wick like being able to do this and being applauded as the hero for it. I'm only talking about like those stories are being told from an American perspective, and they tap right into because they're so popular, right? They make so much money. John Wayne at his time, Clint Eastwood at his time, John Wick now, and so many others that if you know anyone, if there's any violence like movies and stereotypes that you could think of that kind of speaks to what I'm talking to, please put them in the Rambo.
There's a whole list.
But there's an entire list, right? So when I'm talking about that fiction, what I'm trying to point to is that it's tapping into a reality that we all kind of know on some deep level, and that's why that drama is so attractive to us. Right. And that is a societal thing that's rooted in the history, baked into the history of this country, and the massive amounts of violence that it took to bring it to life and sustain it for all of these years.
And impacted by policies and elected officials and the decisions they make. I hear too often, New York has the strictest gun laws, but we still have gun violence. Does anyone know where these guns are coming from? They're not coming from New York. They're not like, it's not as if, hey, New York is manufacturing guns or New York has an issue with guns. Not to say there's never, an illegal gun sale in New York, but they're coming from states that don't have such restrictions, like Florida, like Texas. So that international impact where when people are like, well, I'm just worried about my community. You need to be worried about it on a national and an international level, because it will then become your problem when that happens. And this is what I'm going to make us go to 2025. There's a document that was created that is a blueprint for if Trump is elected into office. And we're having this conversation as a means for electoral education, right? Individuals should be informed about decisions they make before they go to the polls, or why they should be involved in the electoral process. And there currently is a document that's more than 900 pages that lists what
the agenda
that a group of individuals who were all appointees by Trump when he was president. Right? So the authors of this document are handpicked.
Which come out of the Heritage Foundation. And which many of them are Trump appointees, handpicked by Donald Trump. He's tried to distance himself.
Right. He said, I know nothing about that.
I'm not going to do that. That's not what I'm doing. But these are your people.
They are.
Putting this together.
And there's often, this isn't new, right? Political parties create agendas or plans that they want to enact if they gain control. And so page 592, what folks are seeing on their screen, is just one piece, and we'll share a couple others, that Project 2025 would change the 40-hour work week to a 160-hour work month. So your boss could make you work extra hours with no overtime by cutting your hours later in the month. And then there's also this longer list that, folks can kind of read on their own that looks at lots of other ways that we all could potentially be impacted if this project is enacted under a very specific political party. Now, there are folks that agree with this, right? Like there are individuals that think that this is a good idea, that the federal government should be able to monitor American pregnancies and prevent abortion at a national level, removing healthcare protections for people with pre-existing conditions, and banning Medicare's ability to negotiate lower prescription drug costs, right? So it puts more money into the pockets of pharma, and makes it harder for individuals to get their medical needs met, which again then creates this system of violence, because you're going to be in pain, you're going to be suffering, you're going to be hurting if you can't get your medical needs met because of a financial barrier. Rolling back emission regulations, so that companies can simply produce as much carbon as they want because it's cheaper than the regulations that would allow for us to have clean air.
They're going to ignore science, basically.
Right. And so the list that's on the screen right now is really, it's a small snapshot. This is not the full list, folks. And I think it's really important for us to understand what you're looking at right now is just the tiniest little piece of an over 900-page document that is the plan of engagement if Trump is elected to office. The Democrats have a plan as well, and have talked about, the things that they want to do, including, continuing to offer the individuals who have college loans some type of, relief, and pushing forward climate plans that will decrease carbon emissions and increase clean air and clean water, and to actually have abortion be a protected medical right. So there very much is a clear divide between two political parties. And whether or not one or the other gets elected, we have a clear picture about what level of investment the average individual in the city of Schenectady, Albany, Troy, Saratoga is going to receive, versus the wealthy and business owners, as well as the rights that we fought for a very long time and what the status of those will be.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot to kind of, that's a small bit that's maybe sounds like a lot in this short, this snapshot of a moment in our conversation. Like both sides have a plan of action.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm not here to laud, all of the Democrats as if they're, whatever. But I'm gonna tell you one thing: when it comes to what we're seeing from the Republicans, who are now basically the party of Trump, and even in our own local community, I don't know this. They've more than it. Oh, you mean for presidency?
Right. Yes,
oh
yes.
I just feel like, this is going to be one of those moments in time where you really gonna have to really pay attention to the needs you have in our society, because if you're voting or not voting, for instance, in this election, it is going to have an impact.
Yes.
If you silence is still a statement.
Yes.
Right. You're acquiescing to what's going on, and therefore you ain't really got why the fuck are you complaining if you're not even willing to take the time out to be educated on the topic and to vote yourself. I mean, I have a lot of faith in people's ability to, one, educate themselves on the issue, two, come together constructively and collectively to do it, and three, just make their voices heard really clearly on whatever topic you have. I have faith that they have the ability exists. Right. Whether the will exists is something else. Whether folks will actually do that is something else. And I feel like if it wasn't, I mean, all these elections have been these in the last, so from Obama to George W. Bush, all the elections have an impact on our communities. The difference between having George W. Bush in versus Al Gore in 2000 had an impact, on our community. That's what those the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, and so much other things happened, right? After 9/11 under his leadership.
Right.
And this is a moment in time where things are looking to get demonstrably worse, especially for the everyday person, the everyday working person, the everyday person who's trying to take care of his family, but doesn't fit necessarily into the more elite club, which most of us do not fit into that category. And it's about, well, what do you want, and what do you want to see happen? Despite all the rhetoric that we're hearing from all these different spaces about who's right, who's wrong, all you gotta do is look at the actions. Look at the actions. You hearing it with your with your own ears. You see kind of what's been and what's going on. I mean, you got to make that decision, man.
The other piece, and I've mentioned it before, but I think it's really important to mention it again, is that the vote in the presidential election is not just about the presidential election. It is also the message to your elected officials that you're paying attention and that you're going to show up. Because in some places, there are also local elections. There's statewide elections or localities that have elections, DA races that are happening in some places. Speaking from the space of the city of Schenectady, they will, elected officials being the they, look and see, was there an increase of the people who went out to vote, and what communities did they come from? What zip codes, what election districts were actually showing up to the polls?
They're paying attention
to determine who do we need to listen to and what are they telling us right now with their votes. Was there an increase in the Working Families Party line, or an increase in the Republican line, or the Democratic line? And what neighborhoods did it happen in? And a little electoral education. Whatever party you are registered with, you don't have to vote for that party in the election. In the general election, you're able to choose the person, not necessarily the party. And that's information that we find people still don't understand, that you could be a Democrat and vote for any other party. And it does send a message.
Yeah.
Folks are paying attention. We are faced with this immense ongoing violence that some push harder than others. I think that both parties have a bit of a tolerance for the violence, and use it at will in certain scenarios, because both Democrats and Republicans push the police on us all the time. But there's a different degree to in which we are looking at in this moment, and that we will reflect on historically. And I hope that more folks look for opportunities to be engaged, to be involved, to learn about how to register to vote, if to register to vote, where to go to vote. If you sign up for our email list, click that link. You'll get information. You see us out in the streets, ask us questions, shoot us an email.
That's right.
It's
or
available.
Get ready for Hunger Games.
Oh, please no.
Like, sign your kids up.
Please no. I want the
be
good
ready
trouble.
For your kids to run a maze.
I want the good trouble,
for
not
food.
What's
the other one?
Think
about Gaza right now.
Yes, The Handmaid's Tale. There are already children and families that are scrambling every single day to try to get food. Our food pantries have seen an increase. It already is happening. There are barriers. Do we want or need more? Is Project 2025 what the majority of Americans want to see us moving toward? And if not, do something.
Yeah. Are we over time?
We're over time, but please finish your thought.
I was just having more conversation about it. I'm just thinking about, all of the kind of laws that have trickled out of this administration, this Republican Party. The stand your ground laws that we've seen.
It cost children their lives.
Right. This autonomy of the police, which has protected police from accountability.
No accountability.
Right? And they're putting the 10 Commandments in forcing teachers to put the 10 Commandments in schools.
But not the Quran or Buddhism.
They're banning books. And these are happening in different states, but there's a theme.
Yes.
To this. There's a theme coming out of many of these different states in the Republican Party that is headed directly towards a type of autocratic theocracy where religion is the guiding principle. And I was saying this the other day in a meeting with some folks I had that once it's about belief, you can justify anything.
Yeah.
Like, we don't live in a place where we have an objective reality that we agree upon, and not that we ever fully did, but we had more of one than we have now. And once it's about a belief system, belief is like something that is not tangible but impacts everything. Manifest Destiny was a belief system.
Right.
The racial categorizing people by race, even though it's baked into our society, to look at you and me as being one race, this being another race, even though it's not science.
Yeah.
Proven it not be science, right? It's a belief system, and it justifies everything. And that's kind of where we're at and what we're facing when it comes to this party.
And it goes against the Constitution that people say
the separation. Yeah, I mean, but then again, the same people that and this is like Chappelle did this. Dave Chappelle did this in a comedy show where he talks about the same people that booed Colin Kaepernick, for kneeling and not honoring the flag, were beating the hell out of police officers with the flag on January 6th.
Which now is not supposed to be a crime. But anyway.
So I mean, it's a lot to think about, a lot to digest, but that's why we have these conversations and bring them to y'all, because I know this is stuff that y'all talking about out there as well.
Or at least thinking about, grappling with, struggling with, wondering about, right? Like where to find information for these types of discussions. And I really can't say enough. Reach out. Like, we're here as a resource, and we have been for the last almost 5 years, and will continue to be. It is not that the information is not available. All you need to do is ask.
That's right.
So as we move through a very intense Focus Friday, I'm looking forward to Jazz in July tomorrow.
Nice. Summer Nights.
It's Summer Nights. We will be back next Friday, 7 p.m. with a new topic and discussion. And who knows what it may be, because it depends on what happens in our communities.
Shout out to the community news. This is what we do.
Community news. All right,
y'all. Have a great weekend, man.